welcome back to another episode of the Watcast. We're so excited to be back together, to get to talk with y'all, talk to some really cool people. It's my favorite part about this job is just getting to hear stories and hear other people's insights and their experiences and to get to learn from them. Last week, Q got a chance to hear from Krista Entwistle and some of her experiences in Africa and how that has shaped her into the person that she is and sort of formed some of the passions that she has now, even in some of the things she's doing here on campus. And so we're excited to continue the conversation and hear from another student this week. And so, Q, would you go ahead and introduce our guest today?
Yeah, absolutely. But before I do, shameless plug, we got stickers, yo. We got stickers now.
Yes,
official
we do.
Watcast stickers, and we're gonna be selling them at the desk from the hours of 7 p.m. to 9 p.m. when there are people there. So you might see me, you might see Josh, you might see neither of us, but the stickers will be here. So if you want to come by, they're $2 a pop. And just a little bit of an incentive here. If we sell all the stickers, we get the money to order more stuff to then sell to you guys more. So, shirts. So if you guys are interested in that, invest in the process. This week, we're going to be talking to a good buddy of mine, Caleb Bowman. He is a fellow GPC and a missions kid who grew up in Zambia, which is in Africa, as well as India. And he's going to tell us a little bit about culture and missions from his perspective as somebody who has sort of like a hybridized culture, where he grew up in one place and now he is living in another place, and he's living in another place and now he's here. So without further ado, please welcome Caleb Bowman.
All right, Caleb, welcome to the Watcast. We're excited to have you here. I'm excited to hear a little bit of your story. I know we've gotten a couple of chances to talk in passing a little bit about some commonalities, even of both getting to spend some time in India.
Yeah.
You much longer than me, but I remember I loved my time in India, so I'm excited to hear a little bit about what that looked like for you. So to open this time, if you could just share with us a little bit about your story, where you were born, some of the different places you spent your time growing up, and maybe how that has impacted you, your understanding of culture, and even in how to engage and interact with people of other cultures well, and how that's sort of formed you in that way.
Yeah, sure, definitely. I love talking about growing up as a missionary kid, which if we say MK, it means missionary kid, or TCK, that kind of thing. So my family have lived overseas my entire life. So my parents felt called to missions when they were in college. And then after going to seminary and getting married, they moved to Zambia, Africa, out in the middle of nowhere in a little village really, called Luwingu, which is just out in the middle of nowhere. And to kind of give you an idea of what it was like, we were basically 100 miles away in any direction, just like any direction, 360, from any other American, international, like white person, which I don't hate to use that, but so it was just really out in the middle of nowhere. Like to get there, we had a massive Land Cruiser with like jacked up with a snorkel on it, and you had to use that thing. And so that's kind of where I grew up. So we did 2 4-year terms there with the IMB, which was really awesome. I loved growing up there. Loved the culture there. It was a really fun place to grow up as a kid. It was really hard sometimes though, really lonely. I could even see that in my parents, but God did some amazing things there. My family were primarily like church planners, so got to see my dad speak Bemba, their tribal language there, and like preach sermons, baptize people. That's where I came to faith. So it's just really cool even to grow up in that environment. And then when I was about 9 years old, my world completely changed because my parents had kind of been planning churches for a long time, and it felt like their task was done because they had like started the church. And then it's a really cool thing. Most missionaries don't get to experience this, where like my dad was like, I have planted churches, and then these churches are planting churches. and these national believers are doing it so much better than I am. You know, and he was like, I'm not needed anymore. I'm just in the background. So it's a really cool experience for him to be like, okay, where does God want to take me next? Like, they're doing a great job here. So he prayed about it a lot. And if you look at a map of the world, one thing that we talk about in missions is the 1040 window, which is basically this area that covers the Middle East, Southeast Asia, China, India. So kind of that, it's based on like the latitude and longitude, the 1040 window, North Africa, Middle East, and Asia. And if you look at that, that is where there's the most unreached, unengaged people groups. And so my parents were like, we want to be part of that. Like, if there's this many people who don't know about Christ and have never had the opportunity to know about Christ, we want to be part of reaching those people groups. Yeah, so after a lot of prayer, my dad and mom felt called to go to India. And so we moved back to the States for a little bit of a transitional period, about a year. And then we moved to India, which I just turned 10. And it was one of the craziest things in the world, because there's about 5,000 people in our district in Zambia. And then there were almost 18 million people in our city that we were in Kolkata, India. So like, huge difference, like people on top of people on top of people. Crazy. And so like, massive culture shock, just trying to figure things out. Like, my dad was completely fluent in Bimba. Nobody spoke Bimba, obviously. Right. So trying to learn a new language. We moved around a little bit in India as well. But God also was really faithful and did some incredible things just in that culture and among the people that we worked in. My dad kind of switched to like church strengthening, trying to disciple pastors who would reach people. Okay. So it's a really cool opportunity for my family to do that. We lived there for 2 4-year terms again, so it's kind of roughly like 8 or 9 years, depending on kind of like our stateside and stuff like that. Gotcha. And so we were there all the way up until January of 2019.
Wow. So not too long
ago. Yeah. So that was a really cool experience for me. Shaped a lot of like who I am. Really had to trust the Lord a lot, because India is a really difficult place, spiritually, culturally as well at times. But it's a place of great darkness, where I've never experienced before. There's some other cultures that I've been in, but like India is like blatant pagan worship. And like the stuff that you read about like in the Old Testament, like about like sacrificing goats and like these idols and demonic influences, like it's like real there. Like at the heart of our city was a temple dedicated to the goddess of death and destruction, where they would sacrifice black goats. Wow. I mean, that's a little intense and pretty scary. That's crazy. But I mean, like, that was just how it was. And so just trying to be a missionary there, to share the gospel with people there, and just to see such brokenness and heartbreak was really hard. It definitely took a toll. But at the same time, like, God was faithful, and God did an incredible work. And like, one of the most incredible, encouraging things is to see people saved out of that, and like to see the joy in their eyes, and just to like see these people worshiping Jesus. Like, I'm just getting chills thinking about it. Like, it was just awesome to see them like worshiping Christ, and then seeing like the local church and these people who were so passionate for Christ, like in the midst of everything else going on around them. And like, I say that, and not to say like Indian culture was bad or anything, or like is all terrible. Like, there's just so many parts of Indian culture that I love, and like I miss so bad. So like, it's not like I don't want to paint like a bad picture of it anyway. But yeah, it was a really cool ministry doing that. So it's I kind of have a weird story, because most MKs normally will stay like in one kind of continent area. Yeah. But I'm like, a little
two
bit.
Very different places. Very different places. Even just with the number of people.
Definitely.
It's funny. I'm reminded just of some of my time after high school in my gap year with the World Race. I also spent some time in Africa and India as well. I was in a few different countries in Africa, but in one of them, in Lesotho, we spent part of my time, about a month, a little over a month, in a super remote village. Sure. Had to take the car with the snorkel all the way 6 hours from the next closest city. And just super remote village called Mokotlong. And so like loved that place. It was such a slow-paced lifestyle, real quiet, real remote. People were just incredible. And then I also got to spend some time in some urban areas of India, which was just drastically different. And there's so much culture in India that like I'm sure you and I even have very different experiences in the different places we've been. I spent most of my time in Hyderabad, India. I also spent a little bit of time in a coastal village in the Bay of Bengal called Vishakhapatnam.
Yeah.
That was super cool. I actually got connected with a group of people that work with crew out there. Super randomly, just kind of ran into these guys that were working with crew, and so spent like the weekend with them doing some cool stuff and like community outreach in the area. Took like a little trip to Hampi. I don't know if you've been to Hampi, but I
don't think so, no.
It's in like central India, and it's known for its like rock climbing. So I took like a quick like weekend trip there, went rock climbing. Just it's incredible time. But one of those things that I want to ask you about and see if you had some of the same experience in India is hospitality. That's one cultural thing that I like noticed almost immediately. Is there just incredible hospitality in every part of India I was. Yeah. And I think, so we were required to keep a blog, like write a blog every few weeks when I was on the world race. And I wrote one called Unawares that talked about the hospitality that I experienced in India, and talked about this like 4-year-old kid that I met in the streets of Hyderabad. This random kid invited me like to his house
really?
For his birthday party. It was his fourth birthday party. And so I'm like, I literally had been in India for like a week at this point. And I'm like, I don't know if I go to this, do I not go to this? Like what's okay, what's not okay. I went ahead and went just because I didn't know, wasn't sure, figured that the worst that might happen was they not let me in and miscommunication sort of thing, and I leave respectfully. But they like immediately this family, huge family, was living in this like homestead, and there's probably 30 some of them. It was like the grandparents, all their kids and their spouses, and then all of the grandkids and like the cousins all were like living in this little area. And there was like a party going on outside, and they like were all just had some different things to drink, and it was just a really, really cool space, really fun space, really open space. But then like when it came time for like the meal, oh my word, I've never like experienced a more like ritualistic sort of meal at this celebration, in that there was like order and structure to how everything was happening in this meal. Even there was this small room in their house that we all sat around this big round carpet, sat down and ate in this room, and they invited me in the room first. You take off your shoes when you go inside, you sit down. So they invited me in first, and then the grandparents came in, or the grandfather came in and sat down. And then the other men came in, and then starting with like the older women came in and sat around, and then all the kids came running in. And then we were served by all like the younger girls of the house, and they like came out with just like little cups of water at first, and drink the water. Then they come around with this basin of water and towel, and they dipped our hands, and all the young girls like washed our hands for us. Wow. And then it was the rice, the big plates of rice, and then it was the whatever type of curry was there for that day. It was a Sunday evening, and
did you make it through that without like your lips burning off, or?
Not the first time. By the end of 2 months eating that kind of spice, you get a little bit used to it. But that stuff is hot.
Yeah, I was about to say, I'm kind of impressed.
But it was so good. I loved.
That's pretty awesome that you got to experience that like so quickly. Like it sounds like you got to be a part of like a little bit more elaborate one. That's pretty awesome.
Yeah. It's funny. I got a chance to be a part of some really cool things in a very short amount of time. I also was invited to be a part of an engagement ceremony.
Really?
And I'm sure you know the like wedding culture there, and how these engagement ceremonies are sometimes even like more grand and extravagant than the actual weddings themselves. And so that was interesting in and of itself, because it's so drastically different than like a proposal that you see happen here. It's more like an actual wedding ceremony in the West. But even the fact that it was a Christian Indian engagement ceremony made it like so much more different even than what other things that were going on. But there's just so much rich culture in India. And one of the things that I noticed everywhere was just their incredible hospitality and honor, particularly for strangers. Like they're hospitable with each other and with family and friends, but particularly with strangers, which I think is something I learned in India, just because they're so, like that's something we see so much in scripture too, is to show hospitality to the stranger. And so like I admired that a lot, I think, about my time in India, and just wanted to see if you sort of experienced that same kind of thing.
It sounds like you had an incredible time there. Definitely. That's something that when people ask me like, oh, what did you miss about India, or like what's your favorite part of India, immediately is the people. And a lot of that is because of that culture of hospitality. I think even just the willingness of like, a lot of Indians will sometimes even just leave their doors open. You can just kind of walk into their house. Or they'll just have you over. I mean, we'd go visit a church, and like we'd just make the rounds around the village, and they'd be like, come into our house. Like sometimes like you'd get on a caffeine high, because everybody would serve you chai, and it'd be like this amazing chai, and like you couldn't refuse it.
The chai and those little biscuits.
Cups,
so good.
It was amazing. And so just like the willingness to welcome you into their home. And I think one thing that I think we as Americans could really learn from Indian culture in that way is like you said, like just the openness to strangers, like the respect and honor towards strangers. And more importantly, just the willingness to have people into your home. I mean, like these would be like really small, like, I mean, their whole, like you said, like the extended family thing, they'd all be living like in one little room, maybe the size of the room, like even we're like in right now. And they'd be like, come on in. Like they're not like ashamed of it. They like want you to welcome them in and like make you feel hospitable. Even one of the missionaries that we worked with, like there was a guy that was like, he met through like the gym or something that he was working out at. And this guy like was a Christian. And so our missionary was like, oh, wow, that's awesome. Like, I'd love to meet you. And he invited him over to his house. And he brought out, like when the missionary went over, they brought out this massive spread of food and meat and all this stuff. And so the missionary looked at him and he was like, this guy probably spent his entire month's salary just on this one meal with this stranger guy who he'd never met before. Just like, how the heck? Like the missionary was actually really kind and like, it was like, please take something, because you provided for the meal. So he did help him out. But just like that willingness to like give everything, so sacrificially kind. And I think that's something that we as Americans sometimes miss out on. Like we think in order to host people, like we've got to have like our house perfect. Like, I don't know about you. Like sometimes my mom is like, everything's got to be perfect. Like when guests come over, but just like the willingness just to have people in their home, to welcome people into your life. And then importantly, like a lot of people like will make fun of Indians sometimes, like for being late. And the reason behind that, when you understand the cultural value, is shocking. And the part of the reason is because Asian cultures and some of these other cultures will prioritize people over time.
Yes.
We in America are controlled by the clock. Everything has to revolve around the clock. You've got to be there. You've got to finish this. You've got to like do this right now. Like be on time for this. And when we're done with this, we have this scheduled and that scheduled. And like everything's like boom, 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 boom. It's got to be all this order. But then sometimes we miss out on the relationships with people because we're rushing from one thing to the next. And in India, like, it's almost of like, okay, if I'm sitting down to coffee with you, like, if it goes for an hour, great. If it goes for 3 hours, it's great. Like, I can push this around. It's more fluid. Like, if I'm walking to class and, like, I see you and I want to have, like, a moment with you, I'm going to spend that time because, like, the connection I'm having with you and the person is so much more important than, like, the time.
Yeah.
So even, like, when you're invited to an event, you're invited at 4:30. You don't show up till 6. Yeah. Because it's, like, this buffer time of, oh, you might be late because you know, it's just a really, just like the way they view time and their concept of time is revolved around people as opposed to like American where people are revolved around time. And I think that's something that is just something that America could really learn from.
Yeah, it even reminds me in my conversation a couple weeks ago with Dr. Maxwell actually before this, and then again with Dr. Faircloth, this point of inefficiency has come up, and oftentimes we think about how in a lot of Western cultures, particularly in North American cultures, we prize efficiency,
right.
And everything happens in its place. Everything has its place. Everything has its time. Everything's on a schedule.
Right.
And if you miss that schedule, like your whole day's been a failure, right? And other cultures, we talked about this with Dr. Faircloth. Other cultures oftentimes value people more than they value the time, and that valuing of people over time feels inefficient for someone who's spent my whole life essentially in the States. Like sometimes it's like, man, I'm trying to rush out of a conversation just to get to this thing that I have on my schedule, and you find out that like with Dr. Maxwell, we talked about story and engaging and interacting with other people's stories, and that connection and deep understanding of the other can't come efficiently. It has to be slow. And when we take the time to be slow, we're placing the value on something else, the value on the person where it belongs. And I think that you're absolutely right. That's something that I am still learning. I think and many people are learning and don't even know at all. But I'm also reminded a little bit with what you were saying about even a different side of hospitality than I think we're used to talking about or used to hearing about. Hospitality or even service is this idea that when we think about hospitality, we think about like welcoming people in.
Right.
But one thing I learned about hospitality and service, even in India in particular and some other places that I was, is this idea that them opening up their home to me and providing these oftentimes extravagant meals. I know in some places in India, like Coca-Cola is like gold to them. And when they bring out the Coca-Cola, it's a special meal.
Oh, yeah.
And so
it's expensive.
It's
over
so
there.
Expensive.
Yeah.
It's also really good. It's made with real sugar. It's so good. But all these extravagant meals, they're so welcoming into your home, and that's such an incredible act of service and hospitality. And one thing that I had to learn is that my response also has to be in service and in hospitality. And in doing that, you learn that hospitality is more than just welcoming. It's also allowing yourself to be welcomed.
Absolutely.
I think the story of Zacchaeus, I'm reminded of when Jesus sees Zacchaeus in the tree, he tells him to come down.
Yeah.
And then the next thing he does is, I'm going to come to your home.
Right.
And I think oftentimes we overlook that part of man, Zacchaeus is like, who am I? I'm this little guy that had to climb the tree to see Jesus, and now he wants to come to my home. Like there's something special about that. And so when people are welcoming themselves in or providing these extravagant meals and these sort of ceremonial things of honor, it's like part of honoring them is allowing them to honor you, and part of serving them is allowing them to serve you. And I think that goes both ways in cultures. I think there's a lot we can learn about opening up our doors, but I think there's also a lot we can learn about allowing other people's doors to be open to us. Because even in India, in sometimes I know if there's such an honor shame culture there.
Oh yeah.
That if you were invited as an honored, esteemed guest and didn't go, it's almost disgraceful. In some cases to
or
them.
Even just sometimes you'll hear missionaries come back and be like, or from a mission trip, you can be like, oh man, I had to eat this disgusting thing or whatever. And like, I think a lot of times their culture is different, but we still need to value that. Or just like their willingness to share with you that piece of meat that you think is disgusting, but to them is, like the best part. Or like them wanting to give you that service, like you receiving that and you honoring and respecting them. And like, I mean, there's so many meals that like genuinely, like I was rubbing a cucumber on my lips because of like how hot it was. But like I ate it because like they cooked all day for that. And like I want to honor and respect them. Or even my family, like I've eaten so much stuff, like, but like I was just like, I love these people. Like to me, these people, like, and what they're trying to do is so much more important than whether or not, like, I'll live, like if I eat something spicy, or drink some drink that like I've had like rose water with like honey, and like I have no idea what the heck was in this stuff. I mean, I just drunk it down, and I was happy about it. And like, and part of it's just like when you kind of get out of like, it's not all about you. Like they're serving you, but you're also serving them and reciprocating. It's a really cool relationship.
It is. It's so good.
Yeah, and on that,
so
I want to get on a soapbox for a second.
If
you do have the opportunity to go on a mission trip, like one of the biggest things I'd say is like just don't like complain about the things that like you're in. Like just seek to see the good. Like it might be disgusting, it might be great, but like you just making the little sacrifice of, okay, this is gross, I'm gonna eat it. Obviously, like don't eat something that's like terrible. Like I'm not saying that, but like just like saying like, you know what, like this person invited me over to their house, they offered me this, like I'm gonna eat it. Or like somebody offered, like even like never like you said, the Coke, like to us, like we can go over to a vending machine and buy a Coke. For them, they may have like walked to another village, grabbed a 2-liter Coke, spent like half of their salary on this stuff and brought it back for you. And you just being like, wow, act like it's the most amazing thing in the world. Yeah. Like how they want you to, instead of like, we just like would sometimes devalue that. And I've seen so many mission trips, like they had good intentions and they didn't mean to, but they really hurt some Indian families who sacrificed for them. The mission trip didn't realize it, which isn't necessarily their fault, or just didn't have an attitude of like, wow, that's awesome. Or even just like a willingness to like drink or eat what they were offered, and it just really destroyed some relationships. So I'd say like, even as like, I'm part of CM Global, and one of the GPCs for that. So like, even as you join one of our trips or something, like just keep that in the back of your mind. Like, how can I reciprocate the service that people are offering me? And how can I serve other people as well?
So the next thing that I want to hear from you, I remember coming back from my like 6 months overseas to the States, was like, there was some pretty crazy like reverse culture shock, in spending so much time among other cultures. Coming back to the States was just like crazy and impactful, and honestly really, really hard, even after only being gone 6 months. So I'm curious to hear from you about someone who spent most of their life somewhere else, who just fairly recently came back to the States, and sort of what that transitional period looked like for you.
So this period of like when I came back in the beginning of 2019 to right now is actually the longest that I've ever been like in the States consistently. Like, wow, it's the longest stretch. So like the first time I came back, I was like 4 years old, 4 or 5, and then like 8, 9, and then we moved to India, and then like another. I was like 15, and then like came back. So it's kind of every 4 years, pretty choppy. So I mean, there are multiple different transitions back to the States. I mean, the first one, like when I was little, like we lived so far out in the middle of nowhere, like I hardly knew what sliding glass doors were. So that was fun. Oh wow! When you like automatic doors, that like come back like that. It's
just the little things you don't think about.
Yeah, just funny things.
It's crazy.
Our family always, every single time we come back to the States, and we go to Walmart for the first time, it is a massive culture shock. Yes. Because of like how many different options there are. I mean, like in India, like you have like different brands of peanut butter. Like you might have like A brand, B brand, maybe C brand if you're like in a big city. But like in America, I mean, you can get like any kind of peanut butter that you want. You can get it like crunchy, organic. Like there's like an entire aisle. Or like the cereal aisle, like you've just got to be kidding me. And like it's just overwhelming. Like how do you choose? I mean, that's just kind of a funny thing. But like on a bigger scale, like just culture wise, and I think in sometimes like even like we've been talking about hospitality and people and how they value time and different things like that. Just like the priorities in culture. Even like I'm part of, so they call us third culture kids, which what that means, I think Krista was on here earlier, which I love Krista. She's a great addition to the GPC team and a really good friend. But what it is that she talked about it a little bit, But it's that like your parents are from a different culture. So like that's one culture, your like home culture. Then the culture that you grow up in. And then the blending of those two, which is kind of like your house. So I would say, like, for me, I'm actually like a fourth or fifth culture kid. It's kind of weird, like, if you blend them all together. Yeah. But like America, and then Zambia, and then India, and then like what our home was. So like,
it's this even like with like weird it's a blend conglomeration. Yeah.
So like coming back, but the thing is that you never feel, except like in my home, you never feel like you belong to any of those cultures. So like I would say like my passport is I'm an American, and like I would say to people like I'm American, and I'm proud to be an American in some ways. Some ways I'm not, honestly. Yeah. So like this feeling of like never feeling like you belong anywhere. So like in India, like I would say in some ways I have a lot of Indian culture it just that runs through me. But I can't necessarily say I'm Indian. I only lived there for 8 years. I don't look Indian. I don't speak Hindi really fluently. I do a little bit, but like I'm not like Indian. Like I can't claim their culture. Yeah. I've been influenced by it a lot, but I'm not Indian. And then I'm not also Zambian. Like I've been there for a long time. It's where I grew up. It's where like my childhood was, but I'm not Zambian. And then the thing is that even in those places where you live, you say you're American, but then I come back to America and I am reminded by every single day I'm not American. Yeah. Like I'm genuinely not. Like my culture, my values, the way I look at the worldview, which you've talked on this podcast a lot about, is very different. And so I think even coming back to the States, like just those inherent things that you value, that you see as important, is very shocking. And so the reverse culture shock, in my opinion, is harder than other culture shock, because like when you move to India or when you travel to visit India or these other cultures, you anticipate things to be different. Yes. You anticipate a little bit of craziness, wildness, things being different, people eating different foods, talking different languages. Like you can kind of be like, oh, even if you have no idea what it's going to be like and you're totally shocked by what it is, you anticipate that. Yeah. When you come back to America, you anticipate that to be your home. And in some ways, some of the difficult things that you've experienced overseas, you expect like America to make it all better and like America to be like comforting and like where you feel safe, and you don't. And things are shocking and things are different. Even like our family experienced some church hurt where you experience like expected people in the church to like understand and want to welcome you back because you've been missionaries and want to know your story, and they didn't, or they just didn't really care to. I mean, there were some. I'm not going to paint like everybody is bad or anything. I never want to do that. But yeah, there was some hurt where people would just like be like, oh, wow, you're from India. Did you like, even Chris had talked about like riding on lions and stuff like that. But then they would never ask, okay, like how actually was it? Right. Like you lived there for 4 years. What were your experiences? Like sometimes people just want it. So I think even just the reverse culture shock of coming back to the States and anticipating that to be where you feel comfortable, realizing you really don't fit in. Other things like coming back to the States and like not knowing anything. What I mean by like cultural cues, like, I mean, I came back to the States my freshman year of high school and didn't know what Instagram was. And I had people laugh in my face. But in India, we didn't have Instagram. I mean, we did, but like it wasn't as big as a deal like in that period, like as it was to American girls who like live their whole life for Instagram. And they were like, how the heck do you not know what that is? Yeah. So just little things like that. But I think transition overall was good. But what I'd love to talk about is when I first came to PBA, which I love PBA, like been one of the most welcoming, comforting environments for me. Really feel like I've made my home here. There's some great people, guys even like you who are like, hey, tell me your story, dude. Like I want to get you on a podcast. Facts. Or like Q as well, who will be like, hey, like tell me about your life. And people like that have really helped me feel comfortable. And I love PBA, man. We talk all day about it. But I think one thing is coming back to the States and like from the mission field and feeling bitter. Like for me, part of my testimony is that like when I came back from the mission field, like, I'll be honest, there was some really difficult things that we went through. I even talked about like earlier, like the spiritual oppression, and feeling like for me, I kind of was like, God, I've given you 17, 18 years of my life, like living overseas. I've been through depression, some really difficult, dark things, and being like, okay, God, I gave you that. My family served you. I gave up these years of my life. I'm done. I was like, now it's kind of my time for me to live my life. I'm really smart. I can do all these great things. Like I'm going to live my life. I'm going to do my thing. I'm going to travel and do where I want to go. I'm going to like be, study history and honors and all this kind of stuff that I wanted to do. And I was like, okay, God, like I love you. I want to be a Christian. I didn't hate God, but I was like, as far as like doing missions and like sacrificing my life, I don't want to do that. So I came back and I took an intercultural studies class with Dr. Griffin. Just because like that was what was comfortable for me. I was like, easy A, like intercultural studies. Just let me talk about India. And Dr. Griffin was like, wow, you're amazing. I was like, yeah, easy. So I was just like, so I took it. But it was interesting because Dr. Griffin started talking about unreached people groups, unengaged, unreached people groups, and just talking about how, I remember specifically, I was listening to a David Platt sermon, and he said that there are millions of people all over the world whose only knowledge of God is enough to damn them to hell. Yeah. And it just ripped the heart out of me. Like, I started crying because I was like, there are so many people all over the world who, even if like they wanted to know about Jesus, like don't have the opportunity to. Yeah. And even if they wanted to seek after Jesus, like they don't have the opportunity to find someone who would be willing to tell them about it. And that just ripped my heart out. And I was just thinking like, okay, then now that's why, like I always loved missions and I always will love missions. And like I was always part of it and I loved what my family did. I loved it so much. I love being a missionary kid. I love talking about it. But I mean, it was difficult. That's why. Yeah. But like for me, then that just kind of was like, that's why my family was there. Like that's why they did that. And it kind of helped restore my heart. And God really broke my heart of stone and turned it into a heart of flesh. And I remember in that transformational process, like I was like, you know what, God, like that's wrong. Like you are God and I don't get to do what I want to do. Like my life has to be fully sold out for you. And so I just surrendered my life to God. I was like, God, like if you want me to go back overseas, like I'll do it. And honestly, like God really was like, Caleb, like I'm calling you back to missions. Like, I don't know if that's like full-time missions, like what my parents did, where all they did was missions, or if it's us like working overseas with the intention of doing missions. Like I'm still trying to pray about that and figure that out. But I was like, you know what, God, like I don't get to say like I've given you something because like that's not how it works. Like you have to fully surrender your life to Christ and fully be willing to do whatever he wants you to do. And so like that transition back, sitting in Dr. Griffin's class, realizing that, God really breaking my heart, it was a really, really amazing. It was a really difficult season for me, but also one where I grew so much and like the Lord really used that. And so now like I ended up co-leading the Greece mission trip last year. It got canceled because of COVID. But that was a really cool opportunity for me to like just do that with some amazing people. My co-leader was awesome. My team was awesome. I was so happy. Disappointed that it didn't go, but I mean, I think God was sovereign in that, and I don't know why, but like he's still working through that. And even this year, like just being able to be a GPC and on that missions team has just been incredible. So yeah, that's kind of my story, a little bit long of like how I'm transitioning and coming back and like God like moving in my heart. But yeah, I just felt like that's what the Lord wanted me to share.
Do you remember? So you talked about Dr. Griffin's class and David Platt and listening to that sermon. Yeah. Do you remember what books you had to read for this class?
Oh man, that's hard. I remember I read Radical.
Was that this class?
It was Calling Character and Adjustment.
Okay. That's what I was thinking it might be. Yeah. I took this class as well, and also had to read Radical. Yeah. And I'm wondering if you remember. I'll be impressed if you did. But I remember how impactful it was for me. When he's talking about his own experience in India, and I think it may have been the opening chapter, and he's talking about an experience of India where he was in Hyderabad, which is where I got to spend some time, and he was up near on this hill in the middle of the city. Looking out over this just huge urban sprawl. And in it he says something about how urgent the mission became for him when he looked out over this sprawl at millions upon millions of people and realized that most of them will never know the joy of Christ. And
gosh, I'm just getting chills thinking about it.
And I remember reading that and just breaking down so there's a picture of me standing, and I'll show you in a bit, but there's a picture of me standing on a hill in the center of Hyderabad. And there's nothing but me. It almost looks green screen because it's nothing in this picture but me. You can't see like the hill. You can't see the hill going down. You can't see anything in my surrounding area except for the urban sprawl of Hyderabad across the entire thing. And you see the horizon. On the horizon, it's still this urban sprawl. And I remember like thinking back to that picture of me when I was reading this in Radical, being like, man, like I remember that feeling of like, man, there's a vast amount of people here. And I feel if back in episode 2 of the Watcast, I talked about my story a little bit and my own call to ministry, and talked about how I feel a call to ministry and feel gifted in discipleship. But know that my heart and passion is for culture. And so I don't know what that means. I don't know what that looks like. Still trying to figure it out. Honestly, if I knew what that means and if I knew what that looked like, I probably still wouldn't be in school. But so just learning and figuring that out, and it's always exciting to get to talk to people that share some of that. Share some of that. It's good. It's refreshing. And it's exciting. One of the things that Dr. Faircloth talked about when he was on is culture being a society's pursuit of the good, the true, and the beautiful.
Interesting. Wow.
And unfolding in the conversation was this idea that with that as sort of a working theological definition, like it's not my pursuit of the good, the true, and the beautiful. It's society's pursuit of the good, true, and beautiful, and it can't be done by ourselves.
Right.
Culture is something that is produced in society, in community, among people, and even like some of the hard things that you've talked about, in like not feeling like you really have fully belonged in any of the places that you've been, because you feel like your own culture is this sort of melting pot of all of these, this sort of conglomeration, and like as hard as that is, to not feel like you belong to any one place, like how special that is also to have a culture that has taken the good, the true, and beautiful from all these places, all these different things, to create something new. Like Dr. Faircloth was saying, like this, we come together and we share the good, we share the true, we share the beautiful. We take those good things, those sweet things, and we hold on to them, and we take the things that maybe we could set aside, and we set them aside, but then what we're left with is something that was even more good than before. And so it's cool to get to just hear the impact that the cultures have had on you, and how it's shaped you, and even now produced a passion in you to continue to engage culture in some really cool, really powerful ways. And so I'm excited for you. I'm excited to find out where my journey continues in that space. But thank you so much for sharing. Thank you so much for being on. It was so much fun. Such a treat.
This has been awesome.
It's always a great time to talk about culture. Even like India, like, was such a fun place for me. Before we wrap this up completely, before we go, I'd like to just like give you some space. Like if there's anything else you feel like you want to share, anything on your heart, anything like going on with you, just sort of your final thoughts. Would love to hear from you.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's really awesome just that you and Q both have interviewed me and Krista just about being missionary kids and our experiences in our lives. And I know that me and Krista are not by far the only there's multiple other missionary kids all over campus. I know some of them, they're pretty amazing, awesome people. So then some of them have been only over the seas for like a year, 2 years. Some of like me have lived their whole lives. Like, I would just encourage, like most of them, I would say the ones that are good friends with me will at least say this as well. Like, we love sharing our stories, and we love talking to people. Personally, I like to see someone like ask me about it. So like if you ask me where you're from, like I'll kind of give you, like I'll say Jacksonville if I'm just running away, but like rushing off to something else. Cause it's a long explanation. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
It's long. It's so long. Cause then like people are like, what the heck? But like all that to say, like I like to be asked, and it's fun sometimes to share life with people. And I love to hear about your story, and where you grew up as well. It's not just all about me, but I would say like missionary kids love to share their stories. And like if you see me like on campus or anything, I would love to talk about it. If you have any questions about missions, I'm super passionate about that. Would love to talk about that. I'm actually we've kind of referenced it a little bit, but I'm one of the GPCs for CM Global. Like Krista, I'm on the same team as her. We've been coordinating some trips, had a lot of fun with Missions Emphasis Week. It was really awesome. But like, I would love to see anyone who like isn't interested in missions, like stop by the CM Global Lounge. Q did a great job of explaining exactly where that is.
Q, what a guy.
He's awesome. But like stop by the lounge, like ask us any questions you have, even if like you don't necessarily want to go on a trip. You're just like, I heard this about India and I was wondering, like, do they really eat monkey brains? You know, like you can come by and ask me, you know, like I'll be like, no, I don't know of anybody who does that, but you know, stuff like that. But we just love to help you work through like your calling. If you want to join us on a trip, I'm actually co-leading the South Africa trip. So totally join me for that. That would be awesome. Just wanted to rep that as well. But just like totally, like if you're interested in missions and want to know more about that, like totally seek us out on campus. We wear these shirts, jackets, and the green shirts and stuff. So like we would love to have you join us for one of our trips. I will say that going on a missions trip, even if you don't feel called to missions, will wreck your life and transform your life. I know so many people who have grown closer to the Lord, and it will expand your world, and it will help you look just not at yourself and your own culture, but to realize like there are more people outside of just America. Yeah. There are more people outside of just our neighborhood and who have different cultural values and different priorities than us. And I think when you begin to see that and see the mission of God and the way that God has like created people, created culture, created worldview, like that is an amazing transformative experience. Like it will change the way you live your life in a good way, I believe. And so I would encourage like anybody and everybody who has the opportunity to go on a missions trip, like definitely do it, even if it's just for a week. And I would encourage you specifically go on one that's not just like social work is amazing. I don't want to go on a long rant. We're wrapping up. But social work is amazing, but also you want to be on one that shares the gospel. You want to be on one that's engaging with that culture and sharing the gospel. Like helping people build houses is amazing. I love doing that. I've done some of that kind of stuff as well. But you want to be on a trip where someone's life is transformed because of the power of the gospel. Like we can build 1 million houses, but ultimately like we want someone to be invited into their eternal home with Christ. And so I would even just kind of leave us like on that is like join us for a mission trip with CM Global or with your local church. But just focus on like how can we engage people for the gospel. But yeah, there's my soap opera. Like,
yeah, that's great. I love it. That's so good. There's so much good there. I think one of the things you mentioned is like realizing that they're like people of other cultures oftentimes like have the way of doing things, have the way that they see the world. And I think one of the things that like even in their transformational nature upon ourselves when we go and engage cultures, one of the things that we learn is an awareness of our own lens through which we see the world. I think so many of us are so caught up in thinking about the way that we operate as the norm, that we are blinded to the lens through which we're seeing everything. Right. And one of the things that engaging cultures helps to do is help us build an awareness of this own lens that we have. Yeah. And recognize the lens that other people are seeing us through, and how they're there's a lot of misconceptions about Americans out there. And so giving grace in those spaces, but recognizing that you're also going to need grace because you're not going to understand everything, and you're going to think you do sometimes. But more often than not, you don't until you take the time to learn and listen and love. I think the best way to know someone is to love them well, and to let them love you well. So thanks again for sharing. Love chatting, love talking.
Yeah, of course.
Next week we're gonna get to have just an incredible guest to join us for some conversation, and would love to have Caleb actually introduce who that might be.
Yeah, he's an incredible missionary who's worked with us in the CM Global office, and just like he was there for Missions Emphasis Week. His name's Gary. Has done some incredible ministry all over the world. Is still in ministry actively. Has been through some really incredible experiences just in the Middle East, and having some really tragic things happen to him and his wife. But it's still, like, I just was amazed even in the conversation I had with him about how, like, his willingness to, like, serve the Lord and, like, to go wherever he'd have him to go, and just, like, his passion for the Lord, even in the midst of the difficult things that he's been through. So I think, like, y'all are in for a real treat just to hear him talk. And
I'm excited.
In discussion, he probably has some incredible answers just about culture and the way God is moving overseas. But yeah, that'd be awesome.
Yeah, I'm super excited. Hope you guys are too. Keep tuning in, keep watching. We thank you guys so much for being a part of what we're doing here, and we're excited to keep doing it. So keep watching, keep listening, and keep sharing what we have, keep sharing what we're doing. There's some real cool stuff here that has blessed me, and I hope will bless you as well. So with that said, that is this week of the Watcast, and we will see y'all next week.